Yo, here we are. Good evening to you. George, good evening and welcome back.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for being had. Lovely to have you here. Glad that you're with us. Chewy, hello.
How you doing, mate?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit distracted, sorry, because I'm trying to make sure we've just, here we go. Let's bring it up, shall we? We've just, people know with what we're doing. We're kind of just getting along and doing little bits and pieces along the way, and we're adding things in. And what we did today was we opened up and started a Facebook page. So there you go. So we've got a Facebook page going now. It's really easy to find, facebook.com/Big Hairy News. There's probably all of 8 people who have liked it so far. But you can see, look, isn't that weird? This is like the metaverse and the microverse watching us, which is the live stream 13 seconds after we speak it out or whatever. So as you can see, going along the bottom of the screen right now, we have our new Facebook page up and running. For those of you who are my Facebook friends, I have been broadcasting this show to my personal page, but from now on, I'll only be, when it comes to YouTube, there are other places this is, like in the Dunedin News page and then another Dunedin groups. But when it comes to pages, my pages, the only places will now be getting broadcast is in the Big Hairy News Facebook page. So if you're watching, head to facebook.com/Big Hairy News. I don't know. What do the kids say? Like and subscribe. Ring that bell. I don't think Facebook has a bell. Not quite sure how that works. I'll have to ask Mr. Beast next time I'm watching him to see how it all works out. Anyway, there we are. Hi, boys. Welcome back.
Hi.
What's going on? Anything to share, people? Anything personal to share what's going on?
No, barely left the house today. Glorious.
I had my first outing today since pre-Omicron. And when I say first outing, I mean my first time sort of in a closed room with a group of people. Because one of the things I've been doing for a little bit more safety is we've been getting on with life and wearing masks. That's been our philosophy. But it also means there's been some things that, if they haven't been essential, haven't really done. Haven't been to a cafe, haven't been to a movie. Not really essential, not really changing my life. But today I had a meeting, and for the first time I was in a room with, 18 people. I was the only one wearing a mask, and it was fine. I thought it would be a bit weird, just only because, like when you go and I remember going to stay in Vanuatu for 3 weeks where I lived in the villages and helped them build. And then you come back and you just see the food in your cupboard and you go, holy shit, we've got everything. So there's just a relativity kind of difference. I thought there might be a relativity difference, but it wasn't. It felt perfectly normal and okay. And I had my mask on and others didn't. And it's
time
good.
and space was different and you aged differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was a little bit annoyed that none of them noticed I was like 20 kgs lighter. That kind of annoyed me a little bit, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But maybe they were being polite. You know how you're not supposed to say to a woman, "Are you pregnant?" in case they're not. So maybe that was more what it was. Maybe. Anywho, yes, tonight we've got a little bit of conversation around Roe versus Wade again, because it's still kind of flowing on. I want to have a bit of a talk, guys, also about the idea of what happens and what politicians are and what they believe, what their ideologies are, and how that gets applied to public policy. Chewy, you and I talked a bit about this last night, where we were saying, if something drives someone, and I think it'd be pretty fair to say that for most people who are religious, their religion drives them. For most people who are involved in sort of that evangelical church, a lot of what they do in the world, in real life, in day-to-day life, they would say, I'm doing this, I'm called to do this, I'm doing this because it's what I'm supposed to be here for, that sort of thing. So if that is an ideology within you, that you're here for a reason and you're supposed to be doing this, is it actually possible to separate your politics from your religion like we're being told at the moment? So we might have a bit of a look at that. And also, so personal beliefs versus public policy, and also the line between a party policy and what a member thinks. So, like the conversation around the Roe versus Wade thing in New Zealand, there's Simon O'Connor making it very clear that he thought it was amazing that women have lost reproductive rights in America. That's his personal position. But Chris Luxon saying, well, this is not our policy for our party. So how do you then implement a policy which doesn't necessarily go along with your personal ideology? So that's a bit of a conversation as well. Also, we're sort of going to have a look at COVID. The All Blacks are falling over one by one. It's big hits to the ABs. Some other stuff as well, though. So that's all good, guys. Nothing else you want to mention from there as we get into things?
That sounds good.
All right. As we are getting into someone laughing at me already, Pat more committed to masks than the Labour Party. Funny. I just want to. I mean, I literally didn't have a problem with anyone not wearing a mask. It's your choice, and I think no one should have a problem with someone who wants to wear a mask, and it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I'm just being a bit safer because I have vulnerable people in my life that if I was to bring it home, I would be frustrated that I brought it home. Although, no one to blame because it's a virus and you can't really hide away from it. Hey, Chewy, I wanted to share something with you today. I'm glad you jumped on board today because we're in the middle of our Star Wars conversation, and I watched episode 3 tonight.
Oh, yep.
Just gone. So I told George what I was doing, and I got to. So I've done 3 in 3 nights actually. Watched episode 3, had an early dinner, leftover pumpkin soup from last night, and so I was eating dinner. 5:30. Put the movie on, 2 hours. Was finished by 8 o'clock. It was kind of cool actually. Left the kids upstairs to do the dishes because that's the only reason you have kids. And there was this moment in the third movie, right, where I'll just play the moment. I'll play the moment. Hopefully it won't get us kicked off YouTube because it made me think about life today. So this is right at the end of the third movie when it's obvious that the Senate is losing their power or is being taken over by the dark side.
In order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
So if you missed that end at all, so this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. And it just made me think a little bit about some other things going on at the moment when it comes to liberty and thunderous applause.
Why aren't they investigating massive election fraud and irregularities instead of investigating
Because it doesn't exist.
the people who want to get to the bottom of a rigged and stolen election?
And another quick one for you here as well.
As for the Republican Party, we are today the party of life, and we are the party of everyone. We're the party of everyone.
The rally. I know that's a little bit unclear to what people are chanting. Thank you, Trump, over Roe versus Wade, and watching Natalie Portman at the end of that movie saying, this is the end of liberty, to thunderous applause. I was like, oh, there are so many parallels. I don't know what you guys are like, but I find quite often I am inspired by, I learn by, I see parallels because obviously art reflects life within music and within movies, and that one just stood out to me today. And George, you were actually telling me that was written for a particular reason. Do you want to share that?
Well, I mean, yeah, the sort of exactly what you're saying, that art imitates life. Those 3 movies were definitely, analogies of post 9/11 America and the Patriot Act and that sort of thing. Right? The Homeland Security Department, which people sort of forget is a very new thing, and all the liberties that Americans lost in those years after 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, Star Wars wasn't subtle for those ones. It was very much of its time, and yeah, it doesn't make it any less true. Every time that there's been a dictator or something, generally it's been on a wave of popular support, and everybody's for it until it gets too far gone.
Also, what's missing though from Natalie Portman's little comment there is the tremendous violence that comes along with political changes like that. I mean, it's tremendous applause in the Senate, in the Galactic Senate, but out on the streets we see protests against the overturning of Roe v. Wade would be the most recent example of how it's met with dissent, but also oppression and violence that maybe a princess from Naboo probably doesn't experience, although she was like kidnapped or something like that. So but yeah, think about the spice miners, on Kessel. What about them?
Yeah.
Wookiees.
Yeah, the Wookiees. Exactly.
I like I always used to think, I'm someone who kind of music really impacts me. Like it really impacts me. Not to kind of smash the illusion of the big tough Southern man, but I'm a bit of a crier. And art really like cuts deep, and music really gets me. And I think that I always find it inspiring when within whatever the art is, whether it's visual or audible or whatever it is, it can speak to an issue. Comedians do it for me almost better than anybody, social commentators, and just cut through all the bullshit straight to the heart of it. I think I've told this story before on this show. I can remember Jon Stewart talking to Al Gore, and Jon Stewart was literally said to Al Gore, because Jon Stewart, when he was doing the Daily Show, was basically one of the best places to get actual news. And Jon Stewart was saying to Al Gore, why are we doing this? We're a show that gets introduced by puppets making prank calls. We're not a news organization. Why are we doing this? And why isn't, and he was talking about cable news or ABC or CNN or Fox News. And Al Gore said really, really clearly to him, he said, because the only person in medieval times that could speak truth to the king without fear of getting their heads cut off was the jester. And I think there is so much truth in that today, because with comedy and extend that to other art forms, I think it's some of the best places to get truth, and to get absolute cutting truth through all the bullshit, and just truth for truth's sake.
Oh, look, with the Roe versus Wade thing, people immediately started sharing a George Carlin routine from bloody 30 years ago. And it was just as true now as it was when he did it. And yeah, some of the best news programs around at the moment have been fronted by comedians. John Oliver, the Daily Show continuing to smash stuff out. I especially love John Oliver's we're going to dive into something so boring and so broken, but we're going to entertain you doing it.
Yeah,
it's very depressing.
Yeah. And in New Zealand, Robbie Nicol, White Man Behind the Desk, he's doing it probably better than anybody for an actual scripted piece of comedy. It's
I love his work.
It's good. Yeah, it's really good. And I think it's an important thing to remember. And for me, I find a lot of truthful messages in art. I can receive it very well through art, more so sometimes than watching it on the news. Or when I say receive, I don't mean I'm tricked into it. I'm like it digs in a bit deeper sometimes when I'm watching something or listening to something that's an artistic expression with that truth built into it.
So I just think of a comment that I see quite often. I'm the same. I'm a big music fan. I follow a lot of punk musicians and that sort of stuff, and other artists and that sort of thing. But I love that comment when a musician or a band's page or whatever comes out and takes a position on something, as many did with Roe v. Wade, and other issues around Trump and that sort of thing. And then you get these people going, "Oh, I've been a fan of yours for years, but you got to keep politics out of my music."
Yeah.
And I think the most hilarious one was someone talking to Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine. You just need to stick to music, stay out of politics.
Surely that's a joke. Surely.
I'm a huge basketball fan. I've been a basketball fan for forever, and played for 15 years as well. And I remember a conversation that I saw online talking about the best skilled basketball player was Michael Jordan, without question. However, the best basketball player who is like a human being there's ever been is LeBron James. And what they say about that is because of what he does in the world of, social commentary. Michael is famous for saying he didn't want to participate in politics or make any statements because, quote, Republicans buy shoes or Republicans buy sneakers as well. So he actively didn't want to do it, whereas LeBron James just actually says what he thinks, puts his money where his mouth is. He's built schools in his old neighborhoods for underprivileged kids, and so the best person to ever play basketball is probably LeBron James. The best basketball player is probably Michael Jordan, and I think that if you've got a platform, even if it's not a political platform, you should use it for good.
Well, that's Colin Kaepernick as well.
Yep.
So
Yep.
And he certainly paid a price for that.
Yep.
Which I love when they bring up cancel culture. There's a great example of someone being cancelled and cancelled hard for taking a position.
Well, and the worst thing about that is within about 18 months, 2 years, everyone was taking a knee in the NFL and it was being sanctioned. So he started it, basically lost his career, and never hasn't played again since. But within 18 months of him making that stand, which he didn't make it public either, he just did it privately, out the back sort of thing. It was the media who blew it up, but everyone's doing it, including like the Black Caps at the World Cup, and he's still standing on the sidelines not playing. I'm sure he's fine though. He got to deal with Nike and stuff. I'm sure he's not wanting financially, but not able to play the game that made him famous.
Actually, I just saw a comment in the chat there. There's a doco about George Carlin out at the moment, and I've been meaning to watch it, but it looks phenomenal. Really good.
That was made by... I'm just trying to think. There was one that's just been done recently that was made by another comedian. I can't actually remember who it was, but I can hear the conversation of various podcasts going on in my head.
Yeah, because I was aware of George Carlin's, I guess, later comedy career where he went really hard into just, I guess, political commentary and really skewering people and that sort of thing. I didn't know that he'd been a comedian like decades beforehand and TV shows and stuff like that. So I've been meaning to watch it. Yeah,
Judd Apatow. Thank you, Carl. Yeah, no, I knew it was going on by someone. Hey, look, also thank you to Kim. Appreciate that. I mean, we always take your super chats with great acceptance. Helps us keep the lights on, and that split 3 ways is $1.70 each, boys. So we're going good for tonight, aren't we? $1.70 each. That'll get us almost half a litre of petrol. Can you believe that? Right, and that was for Rage Against the Machine. Did you see the throwing up those horns there? I think that we should have a chat, because this sort of kind of flows on a little bit into what we're talking about, the whole way we receive information and what's going on. And we have been talking last night, and I guess the world's been talking about it for a couple of days, about the Roe versus Wade decision, and it has flowed on into New Zealand politics. And what's happened even today is that Christopher Luxon had to come out again today and say, oh, no, it's going to be fine. No worries, it's going to be fine. Oh, no, it's going to be fine. No, I'm not going to do anything. Now, I actually believe Christopher Luxon. I don't think there's going to be any changes to laws in New Zealand. I don't think it's going to happen. However, the difficulty is, as we said last night, the Supreme Court justices all said that as well. And then as soon as they got the opportunity to, they changed the law. So unfortunately, I think that, and when Mr. Luxon has got people in his party like Simon O'Connor, they're not helping the situation at all for, turn that sound off, for having to have him not have the conversation. So the conversation is going on. A couple of stories. National MP Simon O'Connor stands by pro-life post, denies goading women over Roe versus Wade ruling. What did we highlight out there? Oh, I didn't get any highlights. I thought I'd highlighted something to mention out of there. We are also talking about Roe versus Wade was causing a spiral of distress. So it's been reported that he didn't get told to take it down. I don't know how much I believe that. It's great news if that is what Christopher Luxon says is going to do. Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson on Monday accused Luxon of spinning in the pledges to keep abortion rights as they are. Grant Robertson said, it's great news if that's what Christopher Luxon says he's going to do, but I could also understand why people might be sceptical about that given what he has said in the past, given over half his caucus actually voted against this. He said at the Beehive on Monday. I want to say as well, though, to be really fair and to be honest, Naima Hooter has come out condemning Roe versus Wade, but it's come out pretty clearly that she voted against making abortion legal in New Zealand as well. So, we got to make sure, it's a bit like the Democrats in America hold so much responsibility for this being overturned by not codifying it, that I think we got to be fair and accurate and say this is not just a one-party issue right now. You might say one party has more of a problem with this societal issue, but it's not the responsibility of one party to either have it in place or not. I think there was about a third of Labour Party MPs voted against making it legal. So it's like there's no one here who's spotless in this conversation. Yep, jump in, boys.
So I was just going to say about Simon O'Connor, some really nasty people on the extreme right are definitely waving his flag at the moment. You're talking about the counterspin media and the Lee Williams up in Christchurch and that sort of thing. They're all saying he's in the wrong party and that he should leave and come and join them because they're the only sane voices of real New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah, so it'd be one of those things I'd look around and go, oh shit, okay, no, don't need your help, guys. Just shush.
I hope that they don't gag Simon O'Connor because he's quite entertaining from the backbench, and submitting sort of bills that have no chance of getting through, like bills basically saying that freedom of expression trumps work and safety in terms of mental anguish and that sort of thing at universities. He's one of these people that gets up in Parliament every now and again, says that the left and PC culture has it has infiltrated the universities, right, and is destroying them from the inside out. I mean, he's sort of half true there, but he's one of these sort of right wing characters that does import a lot of the American talking points into New Zealand, and that's why it was it was no surprise that he got on the Roe vs. Wade bandwagon, especially to get a reaction, which he certainly did. He made a story out of a fucking post that said this is a good day, and now we're all fucking talking about it and talking about Simon O'Connor.
Is that a good thing though for him? Do you think he's been talked about in a positive or a negative way? Like I've seen some of the fallout today, and I thought he's not going to last. I wouldn't be surprised for the next election if he was way down the list.
Yeah, he'll be stoked because the people he's talking to will really go, yeah, you're saying what we're all thinking, sort of thing. But yeah, his party's going to be like, oh man, we just want to seem normal, and you just cut our legs out from under us.
Wasn't our thinking that the Luxon's plan was to be the sort of sensible face, and then you'd have you can have ACT, you can have Seymour and that sort of thing, and people like O'Connor dog whistling to the base, doing the sort of talking about co-governance, talking about the racial things with racial undertones, all that sort of thing, talking about the PC brigade gone mad and all these sorts of things. Luxon needs people like this, surely.
I mean, I saw a clip of him today going on about how signs telling people to keep to the left of the footpath and to be kind to each other is blatant government propaganda.
Yeah.
Oh, well, keep left because he's trying to infiltrate their brains that you should always be left is correct. Being
apparently, even in Parliament, even in this house, it's telling me what side of the steps to walk up. I'm like, oh my God, if that's the issue that's got you all hot and bothered, mate, Jesus Christ.
On the just continuing on the Roe versus Wade conversation around what the double fallout was today, Luxon said overturning Roe versus Wade was incredibly shocking and incredibly distressing. I'm very grateful we don't have that position here in New Zealand. I want women in New Zealand to have absolute certainty that when I'm the Prime Minister of New Zealand and the national government, that they know our abortion laws are not going to be relitigated or revisited, that they know that funding for those health services are going to be maintained. Now, in saying that, I mean, not right now, but certainly in the months previously, we've had National going after the Prime Minister because she said something about, I don't know whether it was capital gains tax. There was a tax that she wasn't going to introduce while she was Prime Minister, and now she's not ruling it out. So if they do bring it in, right, if they do bring capital gains tax in, then maybe she can be accused of going against something she promised before an election. How's it any different for this? How do we actually trust that that's the truth? Like, I'll say it again. I don't feel that there'll be a change necessarily to laws around abortions. I'd like your guys' take on that. If you think I'm being naive, I just don't think there will. But a politician saying, I promise before an election, especially when they're in opposition, has got about this much credibility to it because they change their mind like they change their undies, and they change their position based on a whim. I think it's distressing that they use absolutes prior to an election because I've said it before, if it was a tax issue, for example, you might have to change your position because that might be what's best for the country.
I think
this is more of a social issue.
It's completely silly that we're talking about abortion in New Zealand. Like, I'm not too sure why. I mean, I know why, because Simon O'Connor and Luxon having to do his cleanup and all that sort of thing. But then it becomes this thing where news hubs asking politicians on an issue that, primitive democracies like America are still dealing with, but all the politicians are sort of like, okay, of course not. What are you talking about? We're not going to overturn abortion rights in New Zealand.
I just love the fact that you called America a primitive democracy. Like, they're just trying. They'll work it out sometime.
I think it's obvious why, but I think it's obvious why it's being talked about, because it's another arrow for the Labour Party and the left's quiver that they can now fire and go see if it can happen in America. It can happen anywhere. And I think this gets on to the next part of the conversation, which we can slip into now.
Yeah, I was being rhetorical. Yeah, no, exactly. It's like it's being talked about because it's a good story. News Hub loved it. Yeah.
But I think it's possibly more than a good story. I think possibly it's actually going to be not a focus, not the main focus, maybe not the top 5, but what's happened in America is an example of what could happen under a conservative government. And I think that's how it will be talked about. And like I've said already twice in this thing, I don't think there'll be a change to the law, but I think that's what political parties do. Like the right talking about what the socialist left's going to do, yet there's no socialist policies. So I think I think in America, and we said this last night, George, if the left can't use this for their midterms, then there's no hope ever for the left during the midterms. Like this is a big story in America.
Do you mean the Democratic Party?
Yeah. It's going to the talk for a long time is that the Democrats will get wiped out in the midterms. That's typically what happens historically as well. Mm-hmm. But me and Chewie talked about this last night. I was like, if they can't break that cycle with this up their sleeve, with this change and what's to come, what's been indicated to come, including same-sex marriage and some other things as well within the Republican conservative Supreme Court, then I mean you already called it primitive. Maybe I'm just reiterating that it'll be the death nail in this primitive democracy. If the Democrats can't use this to further their agenda, then there's no hope ever.
Yeah,
because it's huge in America. But look, just to jump onto it, George, and we like to kind of run a bit of a through line and talk about other things to do with other issues. The issue that I wanted to bounce off the back of this was actually what people believe behind closed doors, what their actual innate beliefs are, their ideologies are, and is it possible to keep those out of public policy? So I guess what I'm now asking is it possible that Christopher Luxon, as let's just say the Prime Minister, let's say they win next time, can 100% unequivocally keep his pro-life ideology out of his public policy decision-making? Now, I'm not necessarily saying overturning abortion, but I'm just saying, how do you separate that if it's part of who you are? In a religious sense, it's a part of the most important part of your life. How do you keep it out of public policy at all? Is it even possible?
Well, that's a terrifying thought. But I was talking about this with my partner today. It's the feeling that Luxon is trying to have it both ways, and and we've had Collins, we've had all of the other ones. Am I starting to see John Key with rose-colored glasses? That I kind of like the fact that he was just a money guy that would look at the latest opinion polls and go, "Oh, that's what people like. We'll do that then." Because at least you could, a little bit of online outrage, you could really change something.
I don't know. Maybe we have to go back and read Dirty Politics. Maybe we've sort of forgotten, and that's how those rose-tinted glasses. Because he, when you read that book, you see that John Key really did have a calculated network of political operatives that were sort of controlling the party, or even the sort of extra parliamentary stuff like whale oil and that sort of stuff. With quite.
But he looked like a bloke I could have a beer with at a barbecue. That's the holy grail of New Zealand politics. Would I have a beer with this guy? I've seen a couple, and look, they may not be true. They may all be anecdotal stories from people that worked at Air New Zealand and stuff like that. And he definitely does not seem to be a guy that would deign to share a beer with you at a barbecue. So, yeah, maybe that's the yardstick.
I think, Luxon can't. I mean, it's compromise, right? It's a big part of politics, as in parliamentary and party politics. They always talk about compromise. He has to compromise his personal thoughts and ideologies to be the member of a party of a few other different thoughts and ideologies. Otherwise, they just kick him out.
I mean, you guys might know better than I do, but certainly, like, religion in New Zealand politics has never been, at least in my memory, front and center of anybody. Like, they might have mentioned that it's a part, I think Bill English mentioned his Catholicism a few times, but it was never like, I am a good person and I am going to be a good politician because I believe this. We generally don't have a great appetite and a great reaction to it. I think most recently that photo op of Judith Collins having a private moment in a church.
Oh God.
People saw right through that. And it's just I think, if I could speak for your average New Zealander, I don't care. I don't care if they go to church. I care that you do your job and you don't let your personal feelings of, I guess, the dogma of a church or an organization bleed into your decisions for people that don't follow that particular faith or direction, that you've got to look after them just as well as everybody that does.
That's one of the questions, Stewie. Yeah. That's one of the questions. Can you have it not bleed in? And I mean, I guess I would offer the suggestion that you can't. Like, knowing a lot of church people, being involved in a lot of church for a long time, I understand how someone in that world feels and vibes and how they live their life. They live their life that this is my calling. They live their life like there's the omnipresent being in the sky ordering my life for me, i.e. it's because of them that I have this opportunity. How can you not therefore have that influence coming through into public policy? Now, again, I'm not saying that a conservative, whatever Christian is going to get in and change our abortion laws, but there's also the flip side of that is, how does that influence public policy and how do we feel about that? And not to pick on religious people, I mean, many would say I'm one of those religious people, fine. But whatever your personal ideology is, I mean, it may not be quite as advanced, but if you're a vegan, does that influence your public policy? And are we okay with that? Are we okay with the religious influencing your public policy? And what does that mean for a leader of a country? Because I also think this, right, and this is going to sound a bit backwards, I almost respect Mr. Luxon less for being okay with abortion, because that's completely not what his religion or his ideology would typically lend its way towards. And that feels like the consummate in popular politics, where you're just saying something that you don't believe, rather than saying the hard thing that you do believe deep down in your heart. These are just my opinions, obviously. I don't know. I've never had this conversation with Mr. Luxon. But I remember I used to say that's not about something as serious as this issue, but like I was always less respectful of the John Key government when they kept working for families and they kept interest-free student loans, not because I didn't want them, but because I know that's not national policy. That's populist policy, but they rode with them because if they didn't, they possibly wouldn't have got into politics. So it worked well for them politically, but I would rather that political parties and political entities were more true to who they are rather than playing this game of just getting in, because if they just get in based on other things, then you get a Justice Kavanaugh who says it's settled and then he changes the law.
Do you think that's... I mean, I think, if he was given more space to give a more nuanced answer, maybe you would have got that. But I remember that interview that we played it last night, and the person going, that's a yes or no question. And it's like, I think I see what you're saying there. Maybe if he sat there and go, look, personally, I don't believe in abortion, but I want to be a leader of a country where not everybody agrees with that. And I've got to do what's best for the entire country, as a more full answer to that.
Yeah. I think
instead he's trying to hide or seeming to have to hide that he might not agree with that.
And maybe it's because innately, I won't say his belief. Let's move away from Mr. Luxon, because this is more about people's personal beliefs versus their public policy. So let's say person X, who is a pro-lifer, maybe it's because their beliefs impact 51% of the population, of which they're not a part of that group, is a bit different from, I mean, it was a silly example, but being a vegan or that kind of stuff. Because you know what I mean? It's like your opinions around that, should that leak into your public policy, that's not actually going to impact you, but it might impact me. That might make this one a bit more, this policy, like the abortion issue or the pro-life issue, to be a bit more sensitive and a bit more of a worry for some people. That if that attitude leaks in somewhere, that could be far more damaging than if the attitude of being a vegan or being pick another ideology leaks in there.
Well, I remember from the other end of politics in New Zealand, I remember watching a Dunedin Council thing of our Mayor Aaron Hawkins and Lee Vandervis going head to head, as they often do. And Lee was going on about ideological decisions. And Mayor Hawkins going, all decisions are ideological. That's what they are. They come from a position of ideology sometimes. It's a nice word to throw around.
Yeah. They love to make this sort of. You see Labour doing it as well. They're like, we're making an evidence-based policy decision rather than ideological policy-based ideologically based policy decision. Ideology has this. It's a sort of dirty word, right? Even though really at the heart of it, in this context, it sort of just means that you've got some principles.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing. We have talked about this lots on the show. I'm going to play a clip that actually, I think, hopefully reflects a little bit back on the show, not because the clip is ours, but what we're trying to do here. When we talk about constantly what we want to do is lead a horse to water. Yeah, what I want to be able to do when we have these conversations is give a chance for perspectives to be heard and people to think about it. Now, we often have guests on there with us for 15, 20, 30 minutes sharing their perspectives from a expert's point of view. That's not tonight. You just got three Southern men tonight, but the leading the horse to water thing and being informed, I think is what we're wanting to do and what we're trying to do. And I want to play this clip. It kind of flows into the Roe versus Wade conversation because it's about that, and it's an interesting clip, but also what I wanted to do was it demonstrates when you are informed how you can make your point clearly and concisely, right? So these are a couple of young women in America who are pro-choice, I think is the correct term. Perhaps I'm not sure what term they would use for that, but they're out in the streets protesting because of the Roe decision. And just have a listen to how they speak. I mean, what would they be? 20, 21, 22, maybe 25, and just the idea of being informed and having that information and thinking things through and coming to a position, I think is really important for all of us. It's sort of what we're trying to do here by giving you guys a broad perspective on these issues and bringing experts on it all. And I saw this and I just went, gosh, if we could ever get to a point where people come away from our shows learning this kind of stuff on whatever the topic is, that would just be my absolute dream. So have a listen to these guys who are talking about the Roe decision. Have a listen to the perspectives they bring, and then we'll either happy to talk about this, but hopefully you'll get what I'm trying to say, which is, you know, an informed public is actually a public that can, I think, affect a change and also know where to put their vote. Right? So here we go.
Message from Joe Biden's campaign. So I received a text message from Joe Biden's campaign yesterday saying that the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade and that it was my responsibility to then rush $15 to the Democratic National Party. And I thought that was absolutely outrageous because my rights should not be a fundraising point for them or a campaigning point. They have had multiple opportunities to codify Roe into law over the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they haven't done it. And if they're going to keep campaigning on this point, they should actually do something about it.
What are you most worried about, Julian?
I'm most worried about what comes next because Roe versus Wade was a precedent for Obergefell versus Hodges, Loving versus Virginia, Irving versus Texas, gay marriage, interracial marriage, and privacy in the bedroom. And those, as Clarence Thomas came out yesterday, they're going to be falling like dominoes.
You come from Texas. You're in Austin, Texas. There's a trigger law in place in Austin in 30 days.
Yes.
Abortion's going to be banned in your state.
Abortion has been banned at 6 weeks in my state since last September, which is an essential all-out ban because most women don't even realize they're pregnant before that point. And there are women in Texas who've already died and have already been arrested for having an abortion or a miscarriage because we can't really tell that.
It seems like you have obvious anger towards the Democratic Party because you feel as if they've missed chances to codify Roe up until this point, and then here we are. What does that mean for you when it comes to the midterm elections and getting more Democrats elected to move forward with trying to codify Roe?
Well, when it comes down to the primaries, which I think are coming up in the next couple months, it means that we need to get as many people to the polls as possible to vote for more progressive Democrats. We need to get the old white Democrats out of office and put in new, younger people who will actually defend the rights of women and people all over this country. And then when it comes to midterms, we need to make sure that we have those same people who voted for the progressive people in the primaries coming back to the midterms and voting again and making sure that these more progressive Democrats get into office and can actually make the change that we need.
Is this going to be your number one issue?
Yes, but for the organization that I work with, RiseUpForAbortionRights.org, it's legal abortion on demand nationwide, and we don't really care about how they get that done. We don't care about which institution gets it done. We know it won't be the Supreme Court, but somebody needs to do it.
So there you go. So, you know, happy for you guys. You want to jump in on what they've actually said, but also just the idea of, you know, it's like, you know, it's like there's that saying about iron on iron sharpens one another, being precise and being exact and having your information. And, you know, these guys have not only been led to water, they're now leading others to water, and they're all drinking massive amounts because they know their shit, they have their information, and it makes them so very effective, as you just heard.
But I mean, as I'm watching them speak and making excellent points, and obviously knowing exactly what they need to do, the one thought in the back of my head is their entire system is set up to stop that from happening. Like, there is so much inertia in the American political system. They've only got two parties to choose from. If there is someone that they can vote for that is on their wavelength, they're going to be dragged one way or the other by the rest of the party. And then nothing changes apart from it's an elephant one year and a donkey the other. You know, and that's got to be just crushingly, grindingly disappointing to change an entire system, and it'll never happen. It's too big. It's too slow.
Well, George, this follows on from that conversation we had last week about absolutism and us talking about valuing your vote, and the vote's the only thing you've got. Now, following that perspective of people valuing their vote, we talked about this a little bit last night, not to beat up this point, but people who valued their vote and stood by refusing because of their principles to vote for, you know, Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, that's one of the dominoes that's fallen for Roe versus Wade to be turned over. But then again, maybe Roe versus Wade getting turned over might be a huge step towards them getting their system sorted out. So it'll be interesting to see if anything, if this doesn't lead to some kind of change, be that the Democrats not being smashed in the midterms or something else, even if it's years away. I mean, maybe there already is no hope for America, but I don't get how something as massive as this in America, it can't just be the same in 2 years from now. It can't be.
I mean, I look at quite often what happens overseas in the States, in the UK, that sort of thing. I'm just so thankful that we got MMP, that we moved away from that we're not trapped in something like a two-party system. Jesus, it's scary to think, how, as you said last night, Pat, that the US is a socialist country by numbers.
Or left-wing country.
Yeah. But they don't get that result.
Yeah. George, you want anything on this? Because if we don't, we're going to, speaking of MMP, we might go and have a little bit of talk about that conversation around how much shine is coming off Jacinda at the moment.
Okay, let's move on.
Should we do that? All right. Yep. There's lots of comments that have been coming in. So thank you for all of those. We might get some of them as we go through it. We appreciate them. We see them. But we just don't necessarily have time to get all of them on. Or sometimes, it's about you guys hanging out with each other as well. So a New York Times article out in the last, 24, 36 hours by Pete McKenzie talking about abroad Jacinda Ardern is a star. At home, she is losing her shine. Let me read you some of it. Abroad, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand remains a leading Liberal light. During a recent trip to the United States, she delivered the commencement address at Harvard, cracked jokes with Stephen Colbert, had a meeting at the Oval Office with President Joe Biden. At each stop, she highlighted her successes in passing gun restrictions and handling the pandemic. At home, Ardern's star is fading. Rising prices for food, fuel, and rent are making life increasingly difficult for many New Zealanders, and an explosion of gang violence has shocked suburbanites not used to worrying much about their safety. Later in the article, it says Ardern, 41, is one of many world leaders whose support has fallen amid the economic snarls caused by the war in Ukraine and pandemic-related supply chain problems. Biden's approval ratings are in the low 40s, and President Emmanuel Macron of France lost his party's parliamentary majority in an election masked by frustration with the cost of living. Now, Ben Thomas is a conservative writer. There is Ben Thomas there. He is quoted in this article saying, of all these issues going on in our society at the moment, it's not the government's fault, but it's the government's problem. And I think that's a completely fair analysis. And I guess we've been talking about that a fair bit here, saying, the rate of inflation and petrol prices and that kind of stuff, there's not really much the government can do about those things. However, the government has to deal with the fallout from them. I believe it's Andrew Godfrey, the Liberal writer, said Ardern had not gotten enough help from her team. Sorry?
Morgan Godfrey,
sorry. The Liberal writer said Ardern had not gotten enough help from her team in translating her rhetoric into policy. Ardern is, quote, genuinely caring and compassionate person who has a deep commitment to issues of inequity, climate change and child poverty, Godfrey said, but often that doesn't translate to a concrete policy program. So I wonder if this conversation around Jacinda Ardern losing her shine is a little bit like we take for granted what we hold most closely to us. When we see something every day, we take it for granted. When someone from outside our circle, in this case overseas, sees what's going on, they're like, holy crap, that's amazing. Whereas we here kind of go, nah, it's getting a bit old. Nah, What do you think, Joey?
Look, we're exposed to our politicians all the time, whereas overseas, she's a novelty. I think it's unfair. I think, by a lot of metrics, we've done amazingly over the past couple of years. But it's just constantly balanced by the media critiquing and opposition, on their messaging. Just really, dulling it. I don't think it's fair I don't think it's fair That's my.
You don't
my
think
point.
it's fair that the
I don't
shine's come
think it's
off? Is that what you're
fair.
saying?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what they've had to deal with, a global pandemic, inflation that's not really of their creation, the global conditioning, and that's what they're getting hammered on. I think there's criticisms. I wish I'd done more with supermarkets and really gone after them, but then again, really fast reactive decisions from a government can cause more problems than they're worth sometimes. I believe that it'll be a Labour Greens win in the election.
Yeah.
But I'm not comfortable in it. I wonder how many seats that National are going to pull in because their messaging is relentless.
Yeah, I think that the sort of the liberal middle class in this country sort of got high on their own supply, or sort of high on Jacinda's appearances with what's his face and international message, and really what this piece from what's his face, good on him for getting a piece in the New York Times from Wellington. That's pretty cool. That's really what it's saying, right? Is that, well, we're sort of communicating that to an international audience, that she was seen as a sort of darling, but really sort of does a good job of summarizing how that shine has worn off in it. I mean, to me, it's an inevitable sort of thing that happens, right? You sort of get excited about these national leaders that promise so much, and everyone's going to end up being disappointed because, I mean, at the end of the day, they don't have much say in how things go down. There's a whole global system that is far beyond the powers that any parliamentary democracy can deal with.
And it tends to be our political cycle as well. We give someone a couple of terms and then we're like, I'm getting annoyed with you now.
Yeah.
Give the other guy a go.
There's also the adage in life that you don't know how good you've got it until it goes away. I mean, it's a sliding doors conversation. We can't know for sure. But when, Simon Bridges, the then Simon Bridges, started screaming about opening up the borders about a month into, I'm exaggerating, whatever it was, a month into pandemic, which ultimately led to his downfall because even if his own supporters went, pull your head in, then where could we have been under different leadership? And if you still do look at things like inflation and that compared to I think the OECD average at the moment is 9.2 and we're 6.9. I think it says that in that article. I just, you know what it's like. You think, oh God, I don't like living at home with mum and dad. It's such a drag. And then you go out and you got to start paying rent and you got to start cooking your own food. And, for those who are lucky enough, you have to start washing your own clothes. And all of a sudden you realize how good you had it at home. And I think it's probably a bit the same. It's like, it's complacency leads to contempt. I'm used to all this. Maybe it's the grass is greener. Maybe they could be better.
Yeah.
Which is why I guess the National Party at the moment is their messaging is not look how amazing we are. It's look how terrible they are, and
Because
that's what they're going to do for the next 18 months.
In the current system, in a few years' time, we get to move back into the home with our parents because there'll be another Jacinda Ardern promising us the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can you imagine that with Mr. Luxon, with Christopher Luxon? Will he be promising us the world? Or will he just be basically saying these guys are terrible, we'll do better, not having to prove anything? And then after that, there'll be another quote-unquote transformational left-wing Labour, potential Prime Minister coming along promising the world. Maybe is that fair to say that the left more promises the world than the right?
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, it's the whole thing with, I guess, say, a conservative sort of thing. It's not a great leap forward. It's looking back and going, hey, we had it good. We're just going to lock it in. We're going to dig in and entrench here. Whereas the lefties tend to be like, things can be better. We needed fully automated luxury space communism now.
I wish
And
I could say that.
And
I'm still waiting.
I guess if it's, like as Ben Thomas said in that article, was quoted in that article, is, basically nothing going on in society with the economy at the moment is this government's fault, but this government has to deal with it.
The governments can't deal with it because it's on another plane.
And I mean, it would be interesting to see. I mean, we're what, 14 months away, probably, give or take, to the next election. It'll be interesting to see where we are then. And I just hope that we, us guys and people out there in general, I think that voting is a really important thing. I think informed voting is the most important. I've been in an exercise before with a friend of mine who used to run a weekly meeting of people, and he did this thing once where he got policies out and he stripped all the, you didn't know what party they were from, and he just stripped all the party colorings out and just did policies, and people were finding that they were liking the policies that were nothing like what they thought their party allegiances were. It's a really interesting exercise. Maybe, if we're still around that this time next year, maybe it's something we might look at doing, because that idea of just going, if you're voting on policy, what policy do you like? Forget what color is on the letterhead or the masthead. Let's look at the policy that you like. And again, that's like in America, the Republicans overwhelmingly support Obamacare, when it's not called Obamacare, but it's just explained what the policy is.
I did a political test like that where they did policy, and one year it gave me New Zealand First, and I had to go and have a cold shower with a wire brush to teach myself a lesson.
I don't know. I think that, we can't tell what could have happened and what would have happened, but I think the leadership that we had in this 2-year cycle has been pretty good. And I think up until Omicron coming through and perhaps those Wellington protests, there weren't many people who were actually questioning it. It's interesting to know why those Wellington protests and Omicron has turned 20% of the people, maybe, because it's not zero, but 20% of the people away from the good job that the government was doing to now thinking, no, we need to get rid of these guys. I'm interested as to what that is all about. And what that, how that's turned people. I'm not saying to people that they shouldn't have turned. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I'm wondering why and how those last 6 months.
National keep on banging on about inflation, and they also mention our debt. And from everything I've seen globally, we're in pretty good shape. Yes, there is an inflation. Yes, we've had to spend some money to get us through COVID, but compared to overseas, we seem to be doing pretty well. So hopefully we can ride it out better than anybody else does. And I guess what I hope doesn't happen is that Labor gets swept out on a wave of apathy, and then when we get National going, see, we did it. We fixed everything. Because they came in on the downswing.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And also there's that idea of, I remember under the Helen Clark Labor government, Michael Cullen running surpluses for so long. And then the first kind of term of the National Party, they were able to ride all that money in to do some big things, and then they got the credit for it. So it does happen a bit, doesn't it? That what the last guys do probably influence the first term of what you're doing, be it a policy that's put in place that you have to then follow through on, or be it they were either successful and then you get the spin off from that, or maybe they weren't successful and then you have to fix it up. But either way, positive or negative, your first term is probably either cleaning up from the last lot or benefiting from what the last lot did well, or maybe a bit of both. This Thursday, I think we've got Anna Brooks coming on. I haven't told you guys this, I don't think. Anna Brooks, of course, is a doctor out of Auckland University who is researching COVID, long COVID in the lab. And I just thought it's probably time for us to have a bit of an update. I'm seeing the numbers each day, and I'm seeing, I think there was 8,000 cases today, but we also reported in the last couple of weeks that there was some research done out of Auckland. Actually, it was done around the country, but the number I remember was Auckland, to do with wastewater testing. And the wastewater testing in Auckland said that the number of people in COVID in Auckland was 4 times the number that were reporting they had COVID.
Yeah, I could believe that.
The wastewater testing said there could be, I think it was 16,000 people in Auckland, and the official number for that day was about 4,000. I'm giving you approximations, but it was about 3 to 4 times the number. So when we look today and we see 8,000 cases, does that mean if that was 4 times, it would be 32,000? But even if it was twice, it would make it 16,000. I think it's probably a good idea to get an update from, someone who's doing the work, the mahi in the actual labs, and is actually one of the people that the government goes to get the advice from, because once it goes to the government, any bureaucracy, it goes through that big crusher that mashes up all the good ideas, and it comes out a shadow of its former self on the other end that we find out about. So rather than necessarily listening to the government on these things, we've been, for the last, if you're new to the show, we've been doing this for 4 months now. We've spoken to all sorts of people, the Susie Wiles of the world, and the Michael Bakers, and the Michael Plants, and the Anna Brooks about this, and I think it's probably a good time for a bit of an update. Now, one of the reasons that it's been brought to my attention, because to be honest, I'm getting a little bit apathetic about the numbers at the moment, is of course, and I don't know how much you guys will either roll your eyes or not, but there's a All Blacks test match this weekend against Ireland, and the All Blacks camp has been struck with COVID pretty significantly too. The hits keep coming for the All Blacks ahead of Saturday's series opening test against Ireland at Eden Park. Outside back Will Jordan has been ruled out of the match after contracting COVID-19, joining fellow Crusaders David Havili and Jack Goodhue on the sidelines. News Jordan had the virus comes a day after it was confirmed Havili and Goodhue, along with head coach Ian Foster and assistants Don Plumtree and Scott McLeod, had been struck down. Pivot Richie Moanga also missed training on Tuesday with a stomach bug, but he has not tested positive to COVID-19 and is expected to rejoin the team later this week. And I know that a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, it's just freaking rugby. But I'm like, this to me it's still in the headlines. It's still around, it's still happening. And it was just I guess a bit of a reason for me to go, we should check in on it and check up on it. And yeah, that's why when I was in my meeting today, I had my mask on. It's exactly the reason, because obviously they're all sharing hotels and having breakfast together, and it's going around the team. And who knows, by what are we today, Tuesday? It could be another half of them gone by Saturday's test match.
Pat, I was wondering, remember when we used to look at the Southern DHB numbers all the time?
Yep.
And they were 750, right? The other day I thought it was at 300, which I think is what you were saying was but it's at 750. So yeah, it's still all over the place, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the situation hasn't really changed, it seems. I do know that, since our sort of talking about, and this is a little bit different, but talking about masks at schools, I have noticed a few news stories here and there about how schools are just going mask mandatory. In that sort of period over the past few months, when I think people realized that it still was a very serious sort of matter, what was going on. But yeah, I mean, it seems like obviously there's a trendish down, but it seems like those sorts of numbers are kind of similar.
I think there is a trendish down. You can see I'm looking at the thing right now. But then you also got to think, and I'm not trying to be overly dramatic. If it was double, this is the reported numbers. If it was double that, then that graph would be there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's what it is. I don't know. I'm not trying to be a doomsayer. What is it? A soothsayer of doom or whatever. But there we are. Yeah. So 750 a day. But I've also noticed that there's been some days where the daily cases were 4,000 for the whole nation.
Yeah.
And so that's, you say it's all over the place. I think it is. And I think probably that comes down to, how many people aren't recording their positive test. They're just staying at home and they're just getting on with it. And probably on some days, 2/3 of the people report it that have it. And on other days, half the people report it. And that's probably what we're seeing jumping around, which is why I guess they stick to that kind of 7-day average to hopefully give them some kind of indication. But the flip side to all of that is, I guess we've only got one measurement. We've only got one metric, which is this. And according to this, we're for people who haven't been with us before, they talk about getting to 1,000 cases per million people being about a plateau. So that would be 5,000 cases per day, 4 or 5 million people. And that's, you can see that's down in this sort of region. Of course, then we do have to ask the question, is it a genuine 5,000, or is 5,000 really 8 to 10,000? And that's hopefully, I'm not saying Anna has all the answers for that, but we'll pose that to her.
Time for an update.
Yeah, time for an update. What are your thoughts, Joey?
Yeah, look, I think there's quite a bit of apathy out there. We've been doing this for a long time now. And I think people, I think honestly, people are better at staying at home when they feel sick. But I think there's also quite a few people that are like, I just feel sick. I'll stay home. I'm not even going to do a rat. And if I do, there's the answer. Put it up on Facebook. I'm not reporting it to the Ministry of Health or anything like that. I'm just going to stay away from work.
Yeah.
So yeah, the wastewater returning a much higher reading, that absolutely tracks. I have no trouble believing that.
I hope it's not 4 times though. Like, so if there was 8,000 today, that's 32,000. Maybe Auckland was particularly bad at that time. I don't know. So maybe we'll investigate that. Maybe we'll get Anna on and see if there's someone else to talk to us about wastewater and see what it can tell us. But look, I still think, and we've been saying this for the last month or so, is that we're at this point now where really you need to look after yourself. For such a long time, that was look after Gran and Nana and Papa, look after the vulnerable. But because like I was in a room with 18 people today and I was the only one with a mask on. Oh, there was one other person with a mask on, but they took it off to have their lunch and then left it off. That I'm like, that's cool. You guys can do that. I don't want to, and it's look after yourself time. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not wanting to, no harm to anyone else, but it's time for us to be responsible for ourselves, and that's the decision I've made.
Yeah. I must say I've softened my language a little bit in the shop, but yeah, like last Friday was real bad for people coming in without masks on and stuff like that. I had someone go, "Oh, do we have to do that? Is that the law, or is it just your shop policy?" And I was like, well, that's the advice. I'd appreciate it if you put a mask on. And he did. He just grumbled about it.
But it wouldn't matter if it was law or shop policy. A shop is a private institution, and if that's like someone coming into a bar that says no shoes, no shirt, no service, and going, well, hang on, no shirt, is that the law? It's like it doesn't matter. It's a private it's a private establishment.
And then I had another guy, a business type, who he soft pedaled it in. He's like, "Oh, you must be sick of wearing that mask all day." And I was like, "Well, yeah, no one likes wearing them. I've been wearing them for a year though, and it's just a small thing I can do to keep myself and everybody else safe." And he goes, "Oh, well, that's not what the science says." And I was like, "Well, with respect, I disagree." And then he made another point, and I said, again, with respect, I strongly disagree, and it's probably best if we talk about something else. So then we sat awkwardly in silence for 10 minutes. So that was good.
I made a joke today when someone said to me, the evidence is that in a closed setting, a mask will only protect you for 30 minutes and no longer than that. And I made a joke, right? It was just a joke because that's what I do. I went, yeah, that's why all those surgeons and surgeries whip their masks off after 29 minutes and just go for the rest of the surgery without them on. And someone went, whoa, guys, take it easy, and I'm like, it's like, it wasn't like a fuck you kind of thing. It was just like me taking the piss a bit and making a lighthearted joke, but someone else saw it as like a bit of, hey, let's not argue about this. And I was just like, it was actually a good mate of mine that I made the joke to, and it was just literally an off the hand joke. But someone else thought, mask conversation, there's going to be fallout, and there's nothing. It's quite funny.
And then you're in a tent on Parliament grounds before you even know what's happened.
Yeah. Alrighty, team. Anything else you want to wrap up with? Any other special things to? Now I need your advice on this then, Chewie. So we've done episode 1, 2, 3 of Star Wars, right? I'm planning on Solo next. What do you think about Solo next? I'm going to go Solo, Rogue One, episode 4.
Oh, I have feelings about Solo. Solo's one of my least favorites, and it hurts me because it's got Chewbacca in it. So I should really like it. Look, the actor that they got to play Han Solo, it's quite jarring because it's not right to start with. But then you relax and you see that the guy absolutely nails some of Harrison Ford's mannerisms and ways of speaking. Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian is amazing.
Yeah.
And don't let it slip by that they make reference that he fucks his robot. He absolutely fucks his robot.
Oh.
That's in that movie.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen. I mean, I don't know if you guys are the same. It's probably because I'm a simple man. I sometimes go, "Have I seen this movie?" I don't know if I've seen Solo. I think that might be the only one that I haven't seen. I saw Rogue One. Love Rogue One. But I guess what I'm asking is Solo next.
Yeah.
Before Rogue One, because I figure that it's about Han Solo's early life. So it's obviously got to be before episode 4. And it just feels like the natural place to put it.
Yeah, Solo happens during the Galactic Empire, but before the Rebellion. So yeah, it makes
So it is
sense.
the right place.
Yeah.
All right, cool. George, would you like to offer any words of advice about my Star Wars watching? Because, you know, when you started talking about frickin' Naboo, like it's tattooed on the back of your hand, like you know it of like anything, I thought, there's someone who knows a bit more about it. Do you know
I don't really like the movies.
My computer's telling me it's -2 in Dunedin right now. That's chilly, if that is indeed the case. All right, team. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate that. As it's been playing pretty much the whole night. If you have a look down the bottom there, we have a new Facebook page. It's a very small Facebook page at the moment, but we are adding little bits and pieces to this as we go along. And one of the things we've added to it just today was a Facebook page. It also means that it's going to be a place where you can pick up our content. You can also then share our content more easily on Facebook if you see something that you like. And if you head along there, you can like our page and get notified as to what's happening, what's going on, and we would appreciate that greatly. Also, it's a way I've got to add buttons and yet stuff. I'll do a messaging button. You can message us through there as well. And be good to have you on board at our Facebook page, facebook.com/Big Hairy News, just as it says down the bottom there. Other than that, team, thank you for joining us. Thanks for being with us, Chewy and George. It's lovely having the three of us together. It's my favorite way of doing this. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the comments and stuff in there. We should probably finish on a very important one. Mandatory Milo in schools was New Zealand first's best election platform. There you go, Chewy.
Hey, no arguments there.
There you
That's solid gold. If they campaigned on that.
Yeah. That's perfect. All right, guys. We'll be back again tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Māori All Blacks are playing Ireland tomorrow night. What time is that? 7:30? Yeah, that should be right. I'll probably make it at some stage. Got to watch the game first, and then I'll come along and check it out. But other than that, thank you for joining us. Hashtag share our shit. Let people know what we're going to do. People often message me like on Twitter or on Facebook and going, what can we do to help? And I'm like, the best thing you can do to help is tell other people about us. Right? Tell people what we're doing. Let people know what we're about. If you're just new to us because of us being put up on a couple of Facebook pages, then we often do clips when we have guests, and we put the clips out separately the next day, so you can share those around. And it's just a good way you can support us, is to just let people know about us, and that would be great. Other than that, stay safe for the day. We'll catch you tomorrow. Thank you, Chewy. Thank you, George. Thank you, Ball Boys. Thank you, umpires. And we'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Hooroo.